Morning, I'm Dr. Jackie Ryan, and I'm presenting this study on behalf of our research team. I'm an autistic autism researcher. My contact information is on the slide and will be repeated at the end of the presentation. I'm sorry that I'm not able to be with you in person, but I'm grateful to be able to deliver this pre-recorded talk about co-designing a neurodiversity affirming toolkit of practical resources to equip staff and caregivers to provide autonomy support to autistic adults with high support needs. Importantly, our research team included 4 autistic community partners, 2 with high support needs. The other 4 members of the research team included 2 autistic academic researchers, 1 non-autistic academic researcher, and 1 non-autistic occupational therapist. The neurodiversity movement advocates for all autistic people to exert autonomy, which means feeling in control of your life. It's a fundamental human right and a key component of well-being. Yet autistic people experience decreased autonomy, which may be due to having fewer opportunities or less support to engage in autonomous behaviors than others. While many autistic people with high support needs require support to act autonomously, professionals often presume incompetence and may exert undue external control, such as limiting opportunities for making choices and reducing expectations for learning. Encouragingly, some staff are striving to support the autonomy of the autistic person with high support needs. Yet staff feel they lack adequate knowledge or skills and ask for my guidance in doing this. This trajectory of research continues on from my doctoral work, exploring what autonomy means to autistic people with varying support needs and their support staff, as well as how autistic people want to be supported. This presentation is focused on the section that is labeled Phase 1. EBCD, or Experience-Based Co-Design, is a user-focused design process with the goal of making user experience accessible to the designers to allow them to conceive of designing experiences rather than designing services. Experience is defined as how well people understand it, how they feel about it while they're using it, how well it serves its purpose, and how well it fits into the context in which they are using it. In my doctoral work, autistic people told us that autonomy means being able to be themselves and having control over their lives. They told us they want opportunities to make choices and gain confidence, to be able to be themselves, support with executive functioning, to be taught specific skills, and to have autistic role models. These findings have been reported elsewhere. Within our objective to develop a toolkit, what we learned from autistic people and their support staff was our starting point to co-design a toolkit of practical resources that staff and caregivers can use to support autonomy for autistic people with high support needs in the context of community-based support. First, we conducted a structured search of the internet looking for tools to support autonomy. We found many resources, and we learned that current interventions do not adequately address the needs of autistic adults, especially those with high support needs. Existing programs lack focus on the breadth of areas in which autonomy can be supported, do not adequately support executive function, or are not flexible to acknowledge the heterogeneity in experiences, characteristics, wants, and needs related to autonomy. Many interventions are intensive, requiring 30 to 60 minutes per week over many weeks or months, and are not feasible or appropriate for staff to use in their daily interactions and choice points with autistic adults with high support needs. Current interventions target skill development for autistic people rather than streamlined staff-focused strategies. There's a need to move away from deficit-focused interventions that situate problems with autonomy as residing within autistic people, which can reinforce ableism and stigma and does not align with the neurodiversity paradigm. Most interventions are designed for autistic children and youth, specific to school contexts. School is a sensible place to teach children and youth skills for self-determination. However, autistic adults also benefit from autonomy support and opportunities for autonomy in other contexts. Most interventions are specific to goal setting, but not the promotion of autonomy in broader daily activities and choices. Of the identified tools and resources in our structured research, we identified the in-the-moment choice-making skills to be the most appropriate. Our study was informed by self-determination theory and a neurodiversity perspective. We used a community-based participatory research approach in conjunction with experience-based co-design. Experience-based co-design was chosen to give agency to people with lived experience, which we believe is very much related to the promotion of autonomy. We involved autistic people, including those with high support needs, support staff, caregivers, and clinicians. Our approach drew directly on the areas that autistic people had previously identified as important to them. We aimed to shift the view that autistic people lack ability to be autonomous to the view that autistic people may have a lack of adequate support to be autonomous. We recruited 20 participants for our co-design workshops. 14 were autistic people, 5 of whom also had high support needs, and another 2 who were also support workers. We also recruited 6 non-autistic clinicians, support workers, and caregivers. Before each workshop, we sent the PowerPoints for the workshop, information on how to use Zoom, the link to Zoom, and what activities we would be doing with instructions. At the beginning of each workshop, we reviewed our guidelines for working together effectively, definitions of keywords, the goal of the workshops, and the results from previous workshops. At the end of each workshop, we went over next steps. In between workshops, I was available to answer questions either by email or a Zoom call. Our first workshop explored what implementation of the strategies identified previously by autistic people and support staff would look like. We strove to operationalize what we learned in the pre-experience-based co-design stage of the research. The participants were divided into 3 groups that considered each strategy through the lenses of choice, environment, and regulation. The workshops were conducted over Zoom, and participants used sticky notes in the whiteboard feature to record their responses. Each group had an opportunity to respond through each of the 3 lenses. We used thematic analysis to generate 5 principles that are further described in the next 5 slides. These principles are written from the perspective of the autistic person being supported. The first principle is about getting to know me. It includes knowing and remembering my preferences, interests, preferred activities, environments, and communication. It also means knowing how I regulate, my signs of dysregulation, and how to support me to re-regulate. The second principle, don't make assumptions, is about not assuming you know what's right for me. Presume competence, be curious, offer help, but don't force it. And just because I was able to do something yesterday doesn't mean that I can do it today. The third principle of clear communication is about how to ensure I understand your communication. Use multiple ways to communicate, including oral, written, pictures, and lists. Start instructions at the beginning and give all steps. The principle, Advocate with Me, is about supporting me to advocate for what is important to me. This might be formal advocacy, such as for policies and procedures, or it might be informal, such as for my interests and choices. The fifth principle, Always be kind and respectful, is about how I am treated. Allow me to say no as well as to say yes. Be mindful of deficit-based and dehumanizing language. Allow me to say my thoughts. Listen to me. Don't make me feel weird for being different. Consider factors other than autism, such as queerness, mental health, employment, and the built environment. We identified 4 tools and 2 information sheets as applicable to achieving the 5 principles. The tools included a 1-page profile, a communication chart, a chart for exploring decisions and decision-making supports, and a chart for an autism-appropriate environment. The information sheets were about the principles of choice and human rights. In the second workshop, we reviewed the 5 principles identified by the research team during data analysis and asked, do these principles resonate and did we miss anything? Then participants matched the principles to each of the 6 documents we chose in our data analysis. Principles of choice, human rights, 1-page profile, communication chart, the chart for exploring decisions and decision-making supports, and the chart for an autism-appropriate environment. Principles could be and were attached to more than one document. We learned the proposed existing tools were a good match for the principles from Workshop 1, although 3 needed modifications. The communication chart, the chart for exploring decisions and decision-making supports, and the chart for an autism-appropriate environment. We added a column to the communication chart. We changed the decision-making chart to be about choice-making, and we changed the appropriate environment checklist to be about individual needs and preferences. And we learned that while there's a tool to help staff understand autistic people's communication, there is not a tool for helping staff or caregivers to clearly communicate with autistic people with high support needs. So we created an information sheet for staff with tips on clear communication. In our third and final workshop, participants conducted pre-user testing by completing each of the listed 4 tools and answered the following questions. What worked well? What needs to be changed? And what needs to be deleted? Based on feedback, we made additional modifications to the communication chart, the choice-making supports document, and the personal environmental supports needs. And we added information to the principles of choice. So our result is that we co-designed a toolkit of practical resources for staff and caregivers to use to support autistic people with high support needs to enact autonomy. We have hired an autistic graphic designer to complete the toolkit. And when the toolkit has been graphically designed, it will be available online for free use by anyone. We plan to hold a final session with our workshop participants to reveal the final product. In conclusion, we, autistic adults with varying support needs, support workers, clinicians, and caregivers, successfully used experience-based co-design to create a neurodiversity affirming toolkit of practical resources to equip support staff and caregivers to empower autistic individuals with high support needs to make choices. The process reinforced the importance of trust, clear communication, and mutual respect. Thank you for attending our presentation today. And again, I'm sorry I could not be there in person. My email and Blue Sky handle are repeated on this slide. These are the references used in creating this presentation. More references. And finally, thank you to Slides Carnival for the template used to create this presentation.